I was folding the last of the laundry when my son's voice drifted from the kitchen, warm and thoughtless, the way a spring breeze slips through a cracked window. "Honey," he told his wife, "take Mum's card. There's 130,000 on it. Treat yourself." The words clanged against the plates, then against the walls, and finally against my chest. My card, my savings, the nest I built from night shifts and spare tips, from saying no to new shoes and yes to security, from years when coffee was dinner and the light bill was a prayer. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited for him to laugh, to correct himself, to say he meant their card, their money, their plans. But silence, the kind that eats a room, moved in and sat beside me on the couch. A chair squeaked, a cabinet shut, liquid poured. My daughter-in-law's quick, bright voice floated after. "Are you sure?" And my boy, my grown man with a mortgage and a wife and the same cowlick he had at 5, said, "Yeah, Mum's not using it. It's just sitting." Just sitting like I was, like I have been in this apartment that smells like lemon cleaner and old books, where the pictures on the wall tell more truth than the people in the frames sometimes do. The dryer buzzed. I set a towel down, lined up its corners like soldiers, and tried to line up my heart the same way. It didn't quite obey. I stood, walked to the kitchen doorway, and watched them through the narrow slice where the door never closes all the way. He leaned against the counter, scrolling. She spun the gold ring he bought her, the one I helped him afford by not buying a winter coat that year. She was beautiful, I won't deny it. Dark hair, even darker eyes, that quick smile that can turn a room. I don't blame beauty for being itself. But I felt a pinch I hadn't felt since his father left, since the day I learned the quiet betrayal of being invisible to someone you raised, someone you loved beyond reason. "Which card?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, as if we were discussing brands of flour. His eyes flicked up, surprised to find me standing there at all. "The blue one," he said, casual, "the way you tell someone where the forks live. The one you keep in the top drawer." The top drawer where I kept it, because that's where the important things go. Birth certificates, the last photo of his father holding him, the letter from the bank that felt like a finish line. I stared at the water glass in his hand. A ring of condensation grew beneath it like a slow bruise. "That card has my life on it," I said. He smiled like I was being sentimental. "Your life is here," he said, gesturing to the apartment to himself. "We'll take care of you. You should let the money work. Honey saw this retreat." "Retreat?" The word left my mouth like a cough. "It's just a few thousand," she said, already apologizing with her eyes, sweetening the air. "Wellness. You deserve to see me happy," she added, like happiness was a bill I was late on and she was the collector. I thought of the day I first held that blue card, hands shaking, the banker smiling like he could see the roads I had walked to get there. I thought of the weathered ledger I kept for years, the columns of numbers like a calico of survival, rent, gas, school shoes, donated turkey, overtime, overtime, overtime. I thought of my boy at 8, falling asleep on the laundromat table while I folded jeans into ships and sent them sailing across the Sea of Formica. The card was not just money, it was proof that I could pull a future from the teeth of the past. "It is my account," I said. "It's in my name." He nodded, as if we agreed. "Right," he said, "and we're family." The way he said family sounded like a key turning a lock I didn't consent to installing. Somewhere a siren wailed and then faded. Somewhere a neighbour laughed too hard at a sitcom. The world was still spinning, but something inside our little orbit had tilted. "I didn't know you had the password," I said, and he flushed, the first honest colour on his face. "It's not, Mum, I wasn't snooping," he said, as if innocence could be stapled to guilt and made to hold. "Remember when you asked me to pay your electric bill online last winter? You told me the login then." I remembered. A storm had iced the lines. My fingers had been stiff and clumsy. He'd come over with soup and that look adult children wear when they're proud to be useful. I remembered sending him home with a tub of my chili and the feeling that the world had finally turned in my favour. I changed the password after, I said. He shrugged, helpless. Mum, I work in IT. He grinned at his wife like boys do when they show off. She touched his arm with the soft gratitude of someone who has never felt truly unsafe. You can't just take it, I whispered, not because I didn't know the rules, but because I wanted to hear him say he knew them too. He set the glass down, the bruise beneath it spreading. We're not taking, he said, like he'd rehearsed it. We're reallocating. You save for emergencies. Life is an emergency. It was the kind of sentence that sounds wise if you've never had to sell a wedding ring to keep the lights on. My husband, his father, said something like it once, the night he walked out with a suitcase and a debt I still taste in my sleep. The difference between leaving and taking is only a door, and I have learned how to hear a knob turning from a mile away. I stepped into the kitchen. The linoleum was cold through my socks. I put my hand over the drawer where the card lived, and I felt in my palm the hum of every choice that brought me here. I love you, I said, because truths are lanterns and we were in a tunnel. I know, he said, because he is still my son, and the echo of the child in him still answers. But you are wrong, I added, and the air tightened. She glanced between us, a glassy pond catching wind. We can talk about this later, she said, soothing, the way you talk to bees. I need you to know something now, I told him. I wanted to say it softly, but it came out like a hinge. I earned that money without anyone's permission, and I will spend it the same way. He sighed, the big theatrical kind that says, You're making me do this. Mum, it's just money, he said, and there it was, the little blade that cuts big bonds. No, I told him, it's memory. I pulled open the drawer. The blue card lay where it always lay, a rectangle of sky trapped in a shallow grave. I picked it up, felt its smooth face, thought of the day I would need a new knee, the day a pipe would burst, the day something I loved would cost more than I could name. Then I looked at my son, the boy who used to lace his fingers through mine like our hands were learning a language, and I made a different kind of plan. I'm going to the bank, I said, now. He laughed, but it was thin. Mum, he warned, the way a man warns a dog off a stake. I slid the card into my pocket like a secret. I grabbed my coat from the chair. As I passed him, I kissed his cheek, and his skin was warm, and for a second I could pretend we were still us. I'll be back for dinner, I said, and that lie tasted clean. On the bus, the world looked ordinary. Beige buildings, a man singing to himself, a child with a lollipop too big for her face. But the ordinary had split down the middle, and I could see the wiring inside. When I reached the bank, the security guard nodded like I was a regular, like this was a day that had happened before. It wasn't. I sat with a woman whose nameplate said Miriam and whose eyes said she had used to be poor. I told her I wanted to move accounts. I told her I wanted a new card and a new password and a new lock on a very old door. I told her my son was good, because love doesn't disappear just because trust does. She didn't judge me. She typed, paper printed, sign here, initial here. When she handed me the new card, it wasn't blue. It was a deep, quiet black that felt like a night sky you could disappear into if you were desperate. Security questions? She asked, and I smiled for the first time that day. Ask me something only I would know, I said, and she did. On the way home, I thought about how love teaches you where to hide a spare key, and fear teaches you to change the locks anyway. The bus sighed to a stop. I stepped off. My phone buzzed. A text from my son. Mum, where are you? We need to talk. I put the phone back in my pocket. For once, I let the world go to voicemail. When I opened my front door, the apartment seemed taller. The light was different. Or maybe I was. My son stood in the kitchen, shoulders tight, jaw tighter. His wife looked up, hopeful and wary both. I laid the new card. On the table between us, a black star. We will talk, I said, but not about what you're allowed to take. We'll talk about what we've already lost. and in the silence that followed, I heard the sound a bridge makes when it decides whether to hold or fall. I stood there with the new black card burning a square of coal through my palm, the kitchen clock stuttering each second like a judge clearing his throat, and my son watching me with the wary patience of someone waiting for the right moment to push. "What did you do?" he asked, trying to sound calm, but the calm had cracks. "Protected myself," I said, and the word echoed. It's about time inside my skull. He exchanged a look with his wife, who smoothed her ponytail like she could iron the tension out of the room. "Mum," he said, voice softening, "you're overreacting. We were just talking. Honey didn't take anything. You left before we finished." I thought of all the nights I'd left before I finished. Meals half-eaten so I could make the bus, sleep abandoned because a shift opened, dreams shelved because there was math to do. "You finished enough to count my money," I said. "You finished enough to decide what would make her happy." She stepped forward then, eyes shining with that mix of innocence and entitlement I'd started to recognise as its own breed of cruelty. "I've never had anything," she began, which struck me as a strange claim to make while a diamond threw tiny galaxies across the fridge. "I grew up sharing everything. I thought that's what families did." "Sharing," I repeated, tasting the word like a fruit someone swears is sweet while you're feeling its rot. "Let's start there. How much were you planning to share with me?" Silence. A car outside sneezed to a stop, and somewhere upstairs a baby cried. Two sounds that seemed to belong to a more honest world. My son rubbed his temples the way he used to when math homework bloomed into panic, and I would fold the fear back into numbers he could swallow. "You're making this ugly," he said. "It wasn't meant to be ugly. It was meant to be efficient. You don't need that much sitting." I walked to the table and set the black card down, then put the old blue one beside it, like laying two photographs of a person before and after a truth. "Do you want to know what sitting looks like?" I asked. "It looks like me at 42, standing in a grocery aisle putting back apples because rent was due. It looks like me at 50, taking a night shift because your father left a hole in the boat and I didn't have time to learn carpentry, so I just scooped. It looks like me at 62, waking up to my knees singing the blues and counting pills like prayers and saving anyway, because life doesn't ask if you're ready before it adds tax." He winced like I'd struck him, and maybe I had, but with words that owed him nothing but the truth. His wife's eyes flicked to the drawer, to the place the blue card used to sleep. I watched the thought bloom and die. She didn't know where to look for it anymore. I pulled out a chair, sat and folded my hands. "Sit," I said, and their bodies obeyed before their pride could protest. "We're going to talk like people who live in the same story." He smiled without humour. "Your story," he murmured. "The only one I know," I said. "But I'm willing to listen to yours. Start with why you thought you could spend what isn't yours." His shoulders slumped, and for a second I saw the boy who brought me daisies with roots attached because he didn't know how to separate love from the ground. "I wanted to give her something," he said, voice small. "Something big. She thinks I don't try hard enough." The wife inhaled sharply, then covered it with a cough. I turned to her. "Is that true?" I asked. She met my eyes, and for once she didn't reach for sweet. "Sometimes," she said. "He works so much, but it doesn't show. Other men bring homes and vacations and, you know." "I know," I said, because I had once measured love in couches and ring receipts and found the scale rigged. "And you thought my savings could dress your marriage up like a mannequin." She flushed, then lifted her chin. "I thought we're a team." "Teams don't bench the person who bought the ball," I said. My son looked at the cards, then at me, and something stubborn rose like a tide. "It's just numbers, Mom," he said. "You don't even like nice things." "I like heat in the winter," I said. "I like knowing if a pipe bursts it won't drown me. I like sleeping without counting." He threw his hands up. "So what's the plan? Die with a perfect balance?" "Plan A is living with dignity," I said. "Plan B is dying the same way." He leaned back, jaw working. "You changed the password?" "I changed the locks," I said. His wife sighed, and the sigh had the edges of defeat. "This is going nowhere," she said. "Maybe we should go." "Before you go," I said, "I want to check something." I opened my laptop, the old thing wheezing awake like a dog summoned from a deep nap. I logged into the old account, what was left of it now wrapped in alarms, and clicked through to the activity. My son shifted in his chair. "You don't have to." "I do," I said, and the page loaded. There it was. Not a charge, but a series of logins from his device, timestamps lining up with the days I made soup, the days we watched cheap movies, the days he came to fix the Wi-Fi. My throat went dry. "You've been checking it," I said. "Not once, not an accident, for months." He stared at the screen, face empty. "I was making sure you were okay." "By measuring my worth?" I asked. "By counting how alone I could afford to be?" He flinched. "Mom, don't mom me with your—" "Mouth full of my numbers," I said, and the anger finally rose like a hot balloon I'd kept pinned down with both hands. I wasn't yelling, but the room heard me. The clock kept clearing its throat. The fridge hummed like it wanted to leave. His wife touched his sleeve. "Let's go," she whispered, and he stood, but he didn't move. He looked at the black card on the table, then at the blue one, then at me. "You changed everything," he said. "No," I said. "I corrected what you tried to change." He nodded once, like a gambler folding a bad hand, then glanced at his wife for support. She was already distancing herself, I could see it, the tiny shift of blame tiptoeing back toward him. And then she did something unexpected. She looked at me like a woman, not a rival, and said quietly, "I'm sorry." The words fell between us like a coin dropped into a well, and we waited for the splash. It didn't come, not yet. I closed the laptop. "If you want something," I said, "ask, don't reach." My son swallowed. "We need help," he said, finally honest. "We bought that car, and then my hours got cut and the interest—" He shook his head. I was ashamed. Shame I understood. Shame and I were old neighbours who didn't speak. "You could have told me the truth," I said. "You taught me to be strong," he said, and his voice broke on the last word like a rope snapping. "I didn't want to be the kind of man who needs his mother." "Every man needs his mother," I said, "but not like a bank." He laughed, sharp and then soft, then sat again. The clock lost its rhythm and found it. The fridge settled. Somewhere the baby upstairs hiccuped into silence. "I'll help," I said, and their heads jerked like I'd opened a window. "But not with that money. I'll help with a budget, with calls to the lender, with what to sell and what to keep, and how to live inside your means without strangling your joy. I'll help as your mother, not your mortgage." His wife nodded, eyes bright with something I could almost name. Relief? Respect? Maybe both. "Okay," she said, "okay." My son reached across the table, palm up, and for a heartbeat I saw a chubby little hand offering me a dandelion. I put my fingers in his, felt the new calluses that work had written into his skin. "There's something else," I said. "I want access to your plan, not your passwords, your plan. I want to know how you'll stop borrowing from a future you can't afford." He nodded, tears glassing his eyes, then blinked them away, because some habits die hard. "We'll show you," he said. I picked up the black card and slipped it into my wallet, then picked up the blue one and slid it into the drawer where paper clips and rubber bands live, a retired soldier among office supplies. When I closed the drawer, it sounded like a door choosing to stay. We made tea, not peace, not yet, but tea. He washed 2 mugs and missed. A spot, and I didn't correct him. She set out cookies, like offerings. We were 3 people in a small kitchen pretending warmth, and sometimes pretending is the first draft of truth. But as we sipped and spoke, I felt another thread tug, something off, a vibration in the air like a rumour. My phone buzzed on the counter, a notification from the bank. "Unusual activity alert," it read. Not the old account, the new one, the black star. My scalp prickled. "Did you—" I began, but both their faces were open, confused, afraid. I tapped the alert. A transaction pending. Not large, not a retreat. A test. A hand on my new lock. The sender ID wasn't his, wasn't hers. It was a number I knew like a bad song. My breath stopped. My past smiled with all its missing teeth. My husband's name, the one that still sat like a pit under my tongue, crawled across the screen as calm as a Sunday. A payment request from a debt collector I thought I'd buried with our divorce. He had found me, or rather, he had thought I would never stop paying for the hole he dug. I set the phone down very gently, like it was a bird with a broken neck. "What is it?" my son asked, already bracing. I met his eyes, then hers. "It seems," I said with a calm that surprised me, "that you are not the only man who thinks my life is sitting." I didn't sleep that night. The alert sat on my phone like a blinking bruise, small and insistent, a gnat in the ear of my calm. The collector's name was a cheap alias for an old wolf, North Shore Recovery Partners, but the number, the address tucked in the footer, the way the message used the word amicable, that was him. My ex-husband never called a thing what it was. He dressed hunger up as generosity. He called debts opportunities. He called leaving a chance to grow. I boiled water I didn't need, washed a clean cup, folded a dish towel until it became a tight little square that could hold a secret. Around 3, my son texted from the next room. Couldn't sleep either, and I told him to try. He sent a thumbs up. Modern love. At dawn, when the city began making its small animal sounds, garbage trucks growling, pigeons arguing, bus brakes exhaling, I opened the bank app and clicked through. The request had been declined automatically. The new account had better armour. But there was a note. "If you believe this is in error, contact us." Error. I thought about all the ways women learn to swallow that word like aspirin. I dressed in dark clothes that didn't ask for attention and put on the scarf my mother knitted when her hands still remembered grace. I left a note on the kitchen table, went out for bread, and the lie felt thin, but I had run out of thick ones. Outside, the air was knife bright. I walked to the corner store, bought a loaf I didn't want, then kept walking. Past the laundromat where I once folded 100 lives into neat piles, past the school where my boy had learned to count and apparently never stopped counting me. I stopped at the bus stop and caught the number that carries you to the courthouse district, where debt wears a suit and uses syllables like handcuffs. I didn't go inside. I went across the street to a little diner that keeps its lights on like a lighthouse for the shipwrecked. I slid into a booth with a torn red seat and ordered coffee that tasted like old decisions. Then I called the number. It rang too long. Then a man's voice, warm as a closed fist. "North Shore Recovery Partners," he said, and the slick in his tone made my skin feel dusty. I gave him the reference number. I gave him my name. He smiled through the phone. I could hear it. "Ah," he said, "we've been expecting you." "No, you haven't," I said. "You've been expecting my silence." He laughed. "Miss Carson, we are simply trying to resolve an outstanding balance." "From 13 years ago," I said, stirring coffee that didn't need stirring. "From a marriage I left with less than the clothes on my back." He cleared his throat, a sound like paper getting mean. "Debts don't care about anniversaries." "Neither did he," I said. "But the divorce decree did." I had brought the file in my bag, its edges soft from being handled only in nightmares. I slid a paper out, set it next to the sugar packets like a placemat for a ghost. "I am not legally responsible for his loans," I said, reading to myself like a prayer. "He declared bankruptcy after the separation. The judge assigned his debts to him." The collector paused, the sound of typing a little harder than necessary. "There seems to be a discrepancy," he said, and there was that word again, a cousin to error, a synonym for "we found a crack and we're living in it." "A document on file shows a co-signer added post-decree." My mouth filled with copper. "Added how?" "Digitally," he said, "with your email." He read it out. My email, except for one letter. A switched I and E, close enough for a liar, far enough to be a trap. "You're claiming I co-signed a loan after a final judgment," I said. "With an email I don't own." "We don't claim," he said, and the tone changed, a little gravel now. "We collect." "You fish," I corrected, "and today you bit your own hook." He tried a different road. "We can settle," he said, soft as velvet. "Pennies on the dollar, we're talking a few thousand to make a problem go away." "Your problem," I said, "not mine." He sighed like a bored teacher. "Ma'am, we have ways." "So do I," said, because that morning I had remembered something my mother told me while teaching me to thread a needle with hands that weren't yet clumsy. Don't tug on a knot you don't know. Cut it. I hung up, tossed a 20 on the table and left. On the sidewalk I called my son. He answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" "Out," I said. "Listen to me. Lock down your credit. Freeze our names, all three." "Three?" he asked and then got it. "Him." "Him?" I said, and the word felt like a hole you could fall through to a place you thought you'd sealed. "Mom," he said, voice tight, "come home, please." "I will," I said, "after the bank." I went back to Miriam, the woman who knew poverty like a first language. She didn't blink when I told her about the attempt. She printed forms that felt like armour, fraud alerts, affidavit templates, a request for the IP logs attached to that digital signature. "They won't hand it over just because we ask," she warned, "but ask loud." "I can do loud," I said, and realised I was already doing it. We locked my account tighter. We wrapped it in questions only I could answer, in names even love couldn't guess. The street where my mother taught me to ride a bike. The colour of the dress I wore the night my son was born. The middle name I gave myself at 12, when no one knew I needed one. I left with a file thick as stubbornness and a number for a pro bono clinic down on Maple, where the waiting room chairs don't match and Hope wears flat shoes. On the bus back, I thought about how poverty teaches you to be a locksmith, how every door becomes a test and every test makes another door. When I stepped into the apartment, my son and his wife were at the table, eyes on me like I was the weather. "We froze everything," he said, proud and afraid, "even my Xbox." I almost smiled. "Good," I said. "You can live without games. You can't live without a name." I showed them the file. I explained the fake email, the post-decree ghost signature, the collector who pronounced amicable like a threat. My son's face changed as I spoke. He looked angry in a new way. Not at me. At the world he used to believe was fair. "We go to the police," he said. "We file a report." "We start a paper trail," I agreed, "but we also do something else." I set the black card on the table. "We don't get small," I said. "We get precise." We spent the afternoon on hold, our ears numbing to the sweet music that says, "Wait to be worthy." We filed a report with a woman who sounded like she had seen too much to be surprised. We emailed the clinic. We printed the decree, the logs we could pull, the screenshots of that almost my email. At dusk, when the sky turned the colour of a healing bruise, my phone rang again. Same prefix. A new voice, more gravel, less velvet. "Ms. Carson," he said, and he didn't pretend to be kind. "It's in your best interest to settle. Old debts grow teeth." I put him on speaker. My son leaned in, rage shining like a fever. "Old men grow cowardly," I said. "Tell him," my son whispered, and I did. I have the decree. I have a fraud report. I have a bank willing to confirm IP logs. I have a clinic ready to send a letter that will make your office sweat through its shirts. The man chuckled, a sound with no humour in it. "We'll see what the algorithm says," he murmured. "You can't fight the system." "I am the system," I said, and felt the truth land on the table like a hammer. "I am the woman who survived the man who built this mess. I am the mother who changed the locks. I am the one who wakes up first and sleeps last. I am the ledger and the witness. Try me." He hung up. Cowards always do. The kitchen went quiet except for the clock's stubborn throat clearing. My son let out a breath that shook. His wife put a hand on my shoulder, gentle and careful, as if I were a relic in a museum that says do not touch. "You're scary," she said, but it sounded like admiration. "I'm tired," I corrected. "Tired women are the scariest thing on earth." That night, I finally slept. Not deep, not sweet, but longer than fear. I dreamed I was on a bridge again, the same one from the day before, listening to the wood decide if it would hold. This time, it did. In the morning, a letter arrived from the clinic, fast as mercy. "We can take your case," it read. "Come at 9. I dressed like a witness. I tucked the file into my bag. My son grabbed his jacket. "I'm coming." His wife snagged a notebook. "I'll take notes." We walked out together, 3 silhouettes in the elevator mirror, and I didn't recognise us, which felt like a good omen. Outside, the day was clean and thin, like the first page in a new ledger. We didn't speak on the bus. We didn't need to. At Maple, the clinic was buzzing with stories. Behind the desk sat a woman with steel hair and soft eyes. She shook my hand with both of hers. "We see this all the time," she said, and it was both a comfort and a curse. "But not with me," I replied, and she smiled in a way that told me she preferred clients who came armed with their own spine. We sat with a young lawyer whose suit didn't fit and whose questions did. He drew a map of the fraud on a legal pad. He showed me where the signature should break, where the IP should tell the truth, where the letters we'd send would glow like lanterns in a cave of wolves. "We start with a cease and desist," he said. "We escalate with a complaint. We loop the bureau. We notify the court that handled your decree. We use their appetite against them." "Good," I said. "Make them choke." He looked at me like I'd handed him a sword. Maybe I had. We signed papers. We initialed. We agreed to be reachable. When we left, the sun had climbed to its cruelest height. On the sidewalk, my son slipped his hand into mine. He hadn't done that in 20 years. His fingers were bigger, warmer, marked with adult work. "Mum," he said, voice thick and young inside the older one. "I'm sorry." I squeezed back. "Me too," I said, and meant 1,000 things. At home, the phone was quiet. The black card slept in my wallet like a secret that had chosen me. The blue one dozed among the paperclips, a veteran in a drawer full of peace. I made soup, the kind that feeds you twice, once when you eat it, and again when you remember. As we ate, my phone buzzed on the counter. Not a threat, a confirmation. The bank had flagged the IP. The clinic had sent the letter. The algorithm, for once, had a soul. "Progress," my son said, grinning like he used to when a kite finally lifted. "No," I said, tasting the steam, the salt, the salvation. "Proof." I woke to rain that stitched the morning together like a mender in a hurry, neat little needles falling through a grey sky. And for the first time in a long time, the thrum didn't sound like panic. It sounded like a drum we could march to. The clinic's letter had gone out. The bank had flagged the IP. We had a case number that felt like a fence around my name. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the street slick itself into mirrors. My son shuffled out with sleep stuck to his face and hope trying on a new suit. "Any calls?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, which was both a relief and a promise that the quiet was working up an appetite. His wife joined us, wrapped in a robe the colour of forgiveness. She was different now, quieter, yes, but clearer. She had drawn columns last night, sketched a budget like a bruise you finally look at in the light. We ate toast and the rain wrote its own gospel on the glass. At 10 the phone rang. A blocked number. I let it sing 3 notes before I answered. "Miss Carson," a new voice said, gristle under silk. "We've reviewed your complaint." "Good," I said. "Then you can review the part where you stopped touching my accounts." He chuckled like a man who never worries about being followed home. "We've paused collection activity," he said, smooth as an apology written in pencil. "Pending verification?" "Verification is a beautiful word," I said. "I have it. Do you?" He didn't take the bait. "We'd like to propose a mutually beneficial resolution," he tried, and I pictured him in a chair that thought it was leather. "No," I told him, "you'd like me to pay for my ex-husband's talent for disappearing." He adjusted his script. "Your ex-husband is deceased." The floor tilted. "What?" "Last year," he said. "No ceremony, no mercy." 6 months ago, county records reflect. The room tightened around my ribs. The rain stopped listening to me. My son looked up, eyes wide with questions I didn't have words for. I covered the mouthpiece. "He says your father's dead," I whispered. My son stared like the world had given him a math problem with a missing number. Then his jaw set, and I saw the child I raised to keep standing. "Okay," he said, and poured water into the plant I can't keep alive. "Even dead men leave messes," I said into the phone, because I wouldn't hand this stranger the tremble in me. "They do," he agreed almost kindly, "and someone has to clean." "Not me," I said, because grief doesn't come with a broom, and I had already buried too many versions of that man to hold a funeral for another. "Send your verification requests to my counsel." He hesitated. "You have counsel?" "I have women with clipboards," I said. "That's counsel squared." I hung up before he could turn the conversation into a maze. I sat. The chair caught me like a net. My son sat too. We didn't touch the news right away. We let it sit between us like a heavy coat no one wanted to claim. "I thought I wanted to know," he said, voice thin. "But I don't feel anything." "You will," I said, "or you won't. Both are allowed." He nodded, angry at the flexibility. We went to the clinic with the new information, the death certificate the lawyer pulled like a rabbit from a database hat. It changed the angle, not the terrain. "They're testing your gait," the young lawyer explained, drawing more squares and arrows. "Death closes some doors and opens others, but the decree still stands, the fake email still matters, the fraudulent post-decree signature is still fraud." We left with a copy of a letter shaped like a spear. At home, the mail waited with its own knife. A thick envelope from North Shore Recovery Partners, addressed in a font that wanted to be important. Inside, a notice of intent to report, wrapped around a settlement offer half what they mentioned on the phone. A bargain on the life you already paid for. I pressed the paper flat on the table, smoothed the crease like a mother taming a cowlick. "They're scared," my son said. "They're hungry," I corrected. "Hunger looks like fear when you take away its fork." I took a picture of the letter, sent it to the clinic. Seconds later, the lawyer replied, "Do not respond. We'll do it." We didn't celebrate. We did laundry. We vacuumed the rug. We did the small work that keeps a day from collapsing. Around 2, the buzzer rang. I checked the camera. A man in a rain-dark coat, hat tipped low. He looked like a ruin that wanted to sell you a house. I recognized the posture before I saw the face. Time is a good sculptor. It had carved him down, hollowed the cheeks, sharpened the nose, bleached the eyes with whiskey and regret. But the hands were the same, my ex-husband's hands. He wasn't dead, or grief has a sense of humour. I opened the door because I wanted to close something else. He stepped in, smelling like old corn chips and wind. His hat dripped on my mat. He took it off as if manners could buy him anything here. "Maggie," he said, and the name sounded like a coin he'd found under a couch. My son froze in the hallway. His wife drew herself small behind him. I didn't move. "You're supposed to be dead," I said, and the line pleased me more than it should have. He smiled, slow. "News to me," he said. "I read my own obituary once. Nice to know I get better looking every time." "They told us you were," I said. "The collectors." He shrugged. "Useful rumour. Keeps the wolves on the wrong hill." He looked thinner, older, but the eyes were the same 2 stones that could be either warm or cruel, depending on where the sun hit. "What do you want?" I asked, because I had learned to skip the poetry. He set his hat on the table, a trespass that felt deliberate. "To fix this," he said, meaning the thing he had broken. "They're coming after you because of me." "Because of you," I repeated. "I know," he said, and for a heartbeat the room remembered the man who could laugh us into safety and then laugh us out of it. "I didn't sign your name. I swear it. I believed him. The man loved a shortcut, but hated a paper trail. Then who? I asked. He shifted. A partner, after the bankruptcy. A guy who thought a good forgery could be a second chance. He looked at our hands, at the old blue card visible in the drawer gap like an eye. I heard you were doing well, he said. Tentative, covetous. Doing enough, I corrected, which is more than you ever did. He flinched. Fair. He turned to our son. Kid, he said, voice going soft like a con. Don't call him that, I snapped. He's a man, and you didn't make him one. The man in my kitchen nodded and took the blow like a man who has mistaken bruises for love his whole life. I deserve that, he said, looking at the rain, not me. But listen, they'll push harder before they let go. They'll call your work, they'll scare your landlord, they'll file something in a county you've never heard of and hope you don't show up so they can win by default. I almost smiled. We showed up, I said. We brought a choir. He sneered, then softened. Maggie, he said again, and the years tore open for a second, and I saw us poor and young and clever, holding hands on a bus that smelled like wet wool, planning a life with coupons. I didn't come for money, he lied, then corrected himself. Not just money. There it is, I said. He spread his hands. They scared me too, he admitted, making himself smaller, a trick he used when women started to leave. They said they could garnish whatever I don't have. What do you have? I asked. He laughed, a sound like a can kicked down an alley. A cough, he said, a friend's couch, a talent for losing. He looked at our son again, and his eyes did the thing eyes do when they realize love kept growing while they were away. I'm sorry, he said, and I believe that too because sorry is free. My son surprised me. He stepped forward. We're not paying them, he said. We're not paying you either, but if you really want to fix something, you'll sign a statement, you'll come to the clinic, you'll give names, dates, IP, addresses if your memory knows how to turn a computer on. You'll help us make it so they can't knock like this on another door. The old man blinked. A plan had never been offered to him without a bill attached. And then? He asked. Then you go, I said, because closure is a good story and a bad plan. Then you keep going. He nodded slowly, like learning a dance. Okay, he said. Okay. He signed his name with a hand that still knew the shape of it. The page looked different under the weight of his lines, more honest, more final. He left his hat on the table, realised it, came back for it, almost said something that would ruin everything, and didn't. When the door shut, the apartment exhaled. My son leaned against the wall, slid down, sat on the floor like a boy in a hallway who finally believes the monster left. His wife knelt beside him. I sat with the page. The rain softened. The sky remembered how to be white. The clinic called an hour later. They had filed the next letter. The bureau had flagged the account. The collector had paused in a way that smelled like surrender learning to speak. I put the letter with the others. I put the kettle on. I put my palm over the drawer with the blue card and felt the whole house hum. A low, stubborn note that meant, we will outlast this. And then my phone buzzed again. The clinic, the young lawyer, breathless. We have something, he said. The IP logs. The fake signature traces back to your ex's partner. And the partner? He paused, like drama could make the truth gentler. He works for the collector now. Of course he did. Wolves staffing the fence. What do we do? My son asked, eyes bright with a kind of anger that builds instead of burns. I smiled, small and sharp. We pull the fence up by its posts, I said, one by one. I didn't know what justice sounded like until I heard our cheap printer rattle out paper like a drum roll, one sheet after another, each page a nail in a door someone thought would never close. The clinic's email glowed on my screen. IP logs, timestamps, names, and that partner's signature tangled up with the collector's letterhead, like snakes married in a jar. And the young lawyer's message was almost giddy. This gives us leverage. I poured coffee with a steadier hand than I felt. My son hovered by the table, a soldier waiting on orders. His wife had her notebook open, columns sharper now, a budget that no longer flinched. "We go higher," I said. "Attorney General, Bureau, State Regulator, we put this on every desk that knows what a fraud looks like when it wears a tie." The plan made the room feel larger. Fear hates daylight. We threw windows open. We filed a complaint with the AG's office, the proper forms like puzzles you solve with patience and a pencil. We uploaded the logs, the forged email address with its treacherous swapped letters, the decree, the affidavit my ex had, signed, handsome in its finality, ugly in what it confirmed. We filed with the Bureau again, this time with a subject line that tasted like thunder. Evidence of collector collusion and post-decree fraud. While the attachments crawled through invisible wires, I called Miriam at the bank and thanked her like a woman, thanks a lighthouse after a storm. Awkward, grateful, believing in wood and light in equal measure. "You did the work," she said, and I wrote it down in my head, because sometimes the thing you need is not money or mercy, but a sentence you can lean on when the stairs get steep. The phone rang before lunch. A different voice, cooler, government in its bones. "We received your submission, Ms. Carson," the AG investigator said, and I heard a fan humming in a room full of files. "We've opened a case." 2 hours later the collector called, all velvet and vitamins at first, then vitamins cut with glass when I refused to be impressed. "This escalation is unnecessary," he said. "We were in the process of eating my name," I said. "Consider yourself on a fast." He tried the tone menus when they want a woman to doubt her weather report. "There's a simpler path if you're willing to be reasonable." "I am reasonable," I said. "I'm just not convenient." We hung up with the politeness of people loading guns. The young lawyer suggested a meeting, neutral site, a conference room at the clinic, glass walls, the kind of chairs that don't let you slouch. "They'll want to get a read on you," he warned. "Let them," I said. "I'm readable, I'm not edible." The rain had washed the city clean by the day we met. The partner and the collector arrived together like a bad punchline. The partner's suit fit better than his conscience. The collector kept smoothing his tie like the truth was a wrinkle. They didn't expect my son. They didn't expect his wife. They didn't expect that I would set the old blue card in the centre of the table, not as an offering but as a relic. "This is what you came for," I said. "Not plastic, not numbers, power. And I brought it so we could look at it while we talk about what you will not be touching again." The collector smiled with half his mouth. "Ms. Carson, no one here wants a fight." "Then explain the IP logs," the lawyer said, sliding the printouts across the table. The partner's eyes flicked. A tell. He didn't even try to deny. He tried to minimise, which is how men say yes without using the word. "Old client file," he said. "Legacy issues, a vendor mix-up." "A forgery," I corrected. "After a decree." The lawyer tapped a line with his pen. "This IP resolves to your office block." The partner shrugged, a man trying to fit through a keyhole made of his own shoulders. "Shared network," he said. "A ghost could have done it." "Then why does the ghost sign your name?" the lawyer asked, and I almost liked the kid in that moment. The collector leaned forward, palms up. "We're prepared to offer a full cessation of collection activity on Ms. Carson," he said, "and removal of any derogatory reporting." "Not enough," I said. "I want a letter to the AG admitting process failures and confirming the account's origin in error. I want your licenses reviewed. I want restitution for the hours I've spent barricading my life." He blinked. "Restitution." "Time is a wage," I said. "You took mine." They hadn't planned for me to know what I was worth. The partner tried a smile, a little crooked bridge to an old habit. "Maggie," he said, using my name like a hand on my arm. "Let's not scorch the earth." "The earth scorched itself," I said. "We're the ones planting after the fire." My son watched their faces like a man learning a new breed of predator. His wife wrote everything, even the silences. The lawyer slid another sheet forward. Our demand letter, precise as a blade. "Sign and we'll discuss resolution," he said. "Refuse and we litigate. The AG has already requested your internal communications." The collector's gaze darted at that, small and fast. The partner swallowed. The room went flat with that special quiet offices get when truth knocks on their drywall. "We'll need time," the collector said. "Take a night," I allowed, because power, when you have it, should be symmetrical with mercy. I wanted them squirming, but I didn't want to become them. We stood. Chairs scraped. Hands were not offered. The partner lingered by the door, looked at me, and I saw the man my ex had chosen, because they recognised the same ache in each other, hunger dressed up as charm. "You were always the smart one," he said, as if compliment could uninstall consequence. "I was always the tired one," I corrected. "Different fuel." He left. The lawyer grinned. "You're good in a room," he said. "I've been in rooms my whole life," I replied, "some of them locked." At home, we didn't wait by the phone. We cleaned out the hall closet like people who expect to live here a while. We found my son's third-grade drawing of a house with a roof too big for the walls, a door in the middle like a joke. He laughed and didn't cry, and I let that be our miracle for the day. At midnight the email came. I heard the chime and didn't move for 3 seconds, the smallest prayer I know. The collector had sent a PDF, formal, stamped, cold. Agreement to cease collection and withdraw claims. It tasted like victory laced with ash. Attached was a second letter addressed to the AG, conceding process anomalies and a legacy compliance gap that sounded like the fancy way of saying, "We got caught eating with both hands." The last attachment surprised me. Goodwill restitution offer. Not large, not insulting, enough to acknowledge that time is a wage. I read it twice, checked the lines no one reads, the whereases and therefores where old traps live. Clean. My son exhaled a sound I'd never heard from him, half laugh, half sob, like a knot loosening somewhere ribs can't reach. His wife leaned into him. The kettle clicked off. The apartment settled, as if the building itself had decided not to fall. "We did it," he said. "No," I answered, smiling, feeling the old muscles of my mouth remember worth. "We're doing it." We signed nothing that night. We slept. In the morning I called the lawyer first, let him bless the paper, let him swing his pen like a priest's incense, and then I called Miriam and told her we'd be bringing cookies that weren't store-bought for once. I opened the drawer and touched the old blue card, not as a weapon, not as a wound, but as a witness. I thought of my ex somewhere under a hat he couldn't afford, maybe holding a coffee he didn't pay for, maybe telling someone a story where he wasn't the villain, because that's how he keeps standing. I thought of the partner staring at an email that felt like a handcuff. I thought of myself at 42 putting apples back. I thought of the woman at the clinic with steel hair and soft eyes who probably has a drawer full of blue cards in her own heart. The phone buzzed again. Not the collector, a number I didn't recognise. When I answered, a voice I hadn't met yet said my name the way nurses say your name when the test results finally show up. "Ms. Carson, this is the AG's office. We'd like to move forward on additional action. Your willingness to participate could help other consumers." My spine went warm. My son watched my face and saw the weather change. "Yes," I said. "Tell me where to be." After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen where the clock finally cleared its throat and found its rhythm, where the fridge hummed like it wanted to stay, where the light from the window found the black card in my wallet and made it glow dull and strong like a small planet. "One more thing," I told my son, and he grinned like he was already in on it. "We're going to teach people how to do this," I said. "Not just us, everyone." He nodded, fierce and bright. "Let's make a list," his wife said, flipping her notebook to a clean page. And as her pen moved and the phone buzzed again and the city went about its business of surviving, someone knocked on our door. Not a threats knock, not a bill collector's knock, but a hesitant, neighbourly tap. When I opened it, a woman from 2 floors up stood there, with a crumpled envelope and a look I recognised from my own mirror. Someone who'd been told her name was a buffet. "I heard you know how to make them stop," she whispered. I stepped back to let her in. The kettle was already hot. I let her in, and the apartment shifted as if the walls knew a new story was stepping across the threshold and making room beside ours. She was small, bird-boned, clutching an envelope that had been opened and resealed so many times it looked like a bandaged wound, and she said her name like an apology, like she knew names were expensive now, and I set water to boil because some rituals are stronger than fear. My son brought a chair, his wife brought her notebook. The neighbour laid the envelope on the table and smoothed it with trembling fingers, and we read the same old script in a new font, threats in italics, deadlines that weren't real, a demand wearing a gentleman's smile, and then we did what I had promised we would do. We made a plan, we drew a map, we wrote the letters, we taught her how to say no in writing and prove it with dates. We pointed her to the clinic. We showed her where the AG's form lives and how to fill it like a spell, and when she asked if she should be scared, I told her the truth that had kept me standing all these years. Be scared and keep walking. By dusk she left with a stack of pages and a spine she had forgotten she owned, and when the door clicked shut, the quiet wasn't hollow anymore. It felt like a heartbeat. The phone kept buzzing that week, not from collectors, but from neighbours, cousins of neighbours, a cashier who'd seen my son at the grocery store and heard we knew how to make wolves let go. And I realised fear spreads fast, but courage does too if you give it an address. We held a little workshop in the laundry room with folding tables and a dry erase board that still smelled like school. Our building superintendent loaned us a fan that clicked every 7 seconds like a metronome for change, and I stood in front of a circle of women with envelopes on their laps and told them how the trap works and where the teeth are dull. My son walked them through credit freezes and fraud alerts like he was diffusing bombs. His wife ran copies and drew lists and made laughter where there had been only silence. And in that underlit room the air tasted like detergent and hope, 2 kinds of clean. The clinic sent a lawyer with a grin too big for his face, and he promised to take their calls. The AG's office asked if I'd like to give a statement on record, and when I said yes, I heard my voice and didn't recognise it at first. Calm, certain, heavy enough to anchor a boat. The collector signed the agreement. Then another letter arrived like a bow on a confession. An internal review had identified irregularities and corrective actions were underway, which read to me like someone important had decided not to go down with someone unimportant's ship. The partner resigns, the email said, and I pictured him in a lobby holding a box of pens and a framed certificate that meant less than a good night's sleep. I didn't gloat, not outwardly, but inside a small door opened and a breeze came through, the kind that smells like a storm finally passing the house it has circled for years. My ex called once more from a number that changed its name. Every time, he said he'd signed the statement. He asked if I could spare $40 for a bus ticket to know where he'd come from, and I told him I could spare a list of shelters and a wish that he'd stop auditioning for tragedies he'd already performed. He laughed, quiet and surprised, like he'd just heard the joke he'd been telling wrong for 20 years, then hung up without asking again, and that felt like a funeral I could attend without flowers. My son brought me a new scarf, not expensive, soft, the colour of late afternoon sky, and when he tied it around my neck he didn't apologise again. He didn't promise anything impossible. He just said, "We're not going back." And I believed him the way you believe the ground after an earthquake finally forgets your name. We celebrated by paying the electric bill on time and buying apples without counting, small victories that tasted better than cake. I took cookies to Miriam at the bank, the kind you don't buy, the kind you burn a little on purpose because imperfection is proof of effort, and she hugged me like a colleague, which is a better hug than most. Then she asked if I'd speak to their tellers about how to spot the quiet panic of a woman setting a new password while pretending her hands don't shake. And I said yes, because saying yes had started to feel like a muscle, and I wanted it strong. The AG investigator called and said words that made my ribs loosen: enforcement, consent order, civil penalties, and asked if I would allow my statement to be used in training, and I said, use my whole voice if it helps another woman keep her name. The building changed too, as buildings do when their people change. The stairwell seemed brighter, though the light bulbs were the same. The buzzer's ring stopped sounding like a threat and started sounding like a neighbour with sugar to borrow. The laundry room fan kept clicking, but now it kept time for progress instead of dread. One night I dreamed of the bridge again, that old planked spine over dark water, and this time I felt other feet on it, women behind me, beside me, some holding envelopes, some holding babies, some holding nothing but their own wrists to keep the pulse steady, and I raised my lantern and the bridge answered with a groan that meant yes. Then came a morning when the phone didn't buzz and the mailbox held only coupons, and we made pancakes because quiet needs to be fed too. And while my son flipped them badly and his wife laughed like a bell with history, I opened the drawer where the old blue card slept and took it out and thanked it, not out loud, but in that language the body keeps for objects that carried weight without complaint. I cut it with scissors, 2 slow snips, and the sound was clean, like a ribbon at a grand opening, and we put the pieces in 3 different bags because superstition and safety are cousins. Then we took a walk to the river and watched the water carry other people's mistakes away without judging them. On the way back, a woman stopped me outside the bodega. She said she'd been at the laundry room meeting. She said she'd filed her complaint. She said the calls had slowed, and then she cried her thanks into my shoulder in the middle of a street that smelled like oranges and bus brake dust. And I didn't tell her she didn't owe me anything, because sometimes paying with tears is exactly the currency that clears a debt. I went home and wrote a list on an index card and taped it inside the cupboard where I keep the spices, 10 steps to not being eaten. And the first step was not be brave, it was tell someone, because I learned that day that loneliness is the sharpest knife in their drawer. The restitution hit my account and I moved it where it couldn't be touched. Not because I'm afraid, but because prudence is not panic. It's a promise to your future self that you won't abandon her just because the present is smiling. I called the clinic and offered to volunteer on Thursdays to sit in a chair with bad cushioning and explain paperwork like a bedtime story where the monster loses. And they said yes, as if they'd been waiting for me longer than I'd been waiting for myself. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and wrote a letter to the girl I was at 23, the one who thought love was an emergency that justified arson, and I told her everything I wish she had known, including the truth that surprised me the most. The world will try to write you as a ledger, but you are not numbers. You are the hand holding the pen. I folded the letter and tucked it behind a photograph of my son with a kite shaped like a shark that never flew right but always tried. And I whispered a thank you to the day the wolves picked the wrong door. The clock in the kitchen found a tempo that sounded like music. The fridge hummed with contentment. The window held a rectangle of evening so blue it almost forgave every morning. And I put my palm over the black card in my wallet and felt nothing but calm, which is how I knew the story had learned to walk without me pushing it. I stood, turned off the light, and the apartment stayed bright anyway, which is how you can tell a house has moved from defence to home.